Hey everybody, so tonight this episode is going to be called Fantastically, Fallacious Female Philosophies. And this one's going to be a very controversial topic. So, very specifically, it is a man's perspective, specifically this man's perspective, on behavior that women are guilty of that they're really trash. It's not even just my opinion. This is actually a lot of men's opinion that some of these behaviors that I'm going to be talking about are very trashy. They're very immature. They're just very negative in the ways that they're negative. But I do want to preface this with the following so you understand the rules of engagement here. Um, so these statements are not true with all women. There are definitely good women out there that aren't guilty of any of these things, and that's good. That's very good that they're out there, um, because individuals do vary. I mean, you can't sit there and paint one group of people based on gender, disability, skin color, anything with just one brush, one stroke. So, yeah, so as varied as individuals are, these behaviors, um, those exist with different groups of them. So, just in these different situations. So not everybody does this, but I also want to point out that there are things that guys complain about, and I'm not going to talk about them. um, these are things and behaviors, however you want to call them, that we're not talking about, that are rooted in issues like mental illness, addiction, that's a mental illness, rooted in these sort of disabilities, or the effects of someone who's been through domestic violence. So, while there are definitely a lot of bad things that come from all of these, um, I just want to point out that I'm not here. This episode isn't going to criticize behaviors that stem from those situations. It's not. First off, it's not fair, uh, because in cases of mental illness and addiction, and really all of these, the same things can hit men too, and men can respond the same way. It's just part of the human condition. We experience different things. Certain things are going to hit people the same way. While women do tend to react to some of these, more strongly in certain ways than men do. Um, Again, that's not the scope of this. So I'm also going to omit the stupid things that some guys come up with. Um, So some guys will come up with, uh, they have unrealistic expectations in social situations, relationships, other aspects of reality. I mean, we're talking about people who are immature, people who drank the Kool-Aid of their church growing up. And, maybe that's a bad example because I'm not here to criticize religion, but there are very traditional values about women supposed to be submissive, or for some reason some men do demand that women give them their time and attention, and the problem with that is no one's entitled to another person's time or attention. So I want to get that out of the way. But also moving forward, so this discussion is based on the following premises. So if you disagree with the next three statements in any of them, then you are absolutely going to disagree with the things that I talk about. Um, First off, men and women are equal. I know that from a legal perspective, from a practical perspective, there are still inequalities. But ultimately, we are going to, for the sake of this conversation, and honestly, for the scope of what we're talking about, those issues aren't affected. But men and women are equal. But also that men and women have the same rules of engagement in areas of communication, dating, and other areas in life. So that just further clarifies equality. And also domestic violence, verbal, and financial abuse are unacceptable in all their forms in any direction. So that's either from the man to the woman or the woman to the man. Because again, if we're all equal, then neither side has a privilege the other one doesn't have. So we're going to discuss fallacies and female logic in the following areas: dating, careers, and then we're going to have some other miscellaneous things that don't fit in the other two categories. And again, so this isn't meant to be a very exhaustive list. This isn't meant to be a laundry list of what I don't like about women. That's not at all what this is. This actually isn't targeted towards anyone that I know in particular. If I find somebody to be toxic, um, that's done these, absolutely, it's happened. But I've also ejected those people from my life. So if you are in the situation where you're dealing with somebody that's doing some of these things, realistically, you can't expect the other person to change. You really need to get yourself away from that person, away from that situation, and or especially in the case of dating and what you see on dating profiles, these are red flags. So for example, so for dating, let's start with dating. So, we all go through dating profiles. We read dating profiles. And, first off, there's people that will post a profile and then they don't give any bio information. That isn't specifically female fault, but honestly, if you're trying to get a date, absolutely say something about yourself. Um, and don't just assume that the man's going to be the first one to respond. If you want something, you go get it. There's nothing wrong with a woman that speaks up and says, hey, why don't we talk, but yeah. But one of the things that come up in some of these bios is they'll say, oh, well, if you're under 6 foot, I'm not interested. So there's nothing wrong with having a preference. And so men have preferences too. There are men, and I'm one of them, that are not attracted to obese women. So if you ask, if you want to know a guy's height, we men don't really care about a woman's height. Um, it might be a thing if it's a short guy or like a really short guy. Um, that might not want a tall woman. So I know tall women have a problem with dating, but that's not cool either because But that's going to be that's not what this is about. I do think that in a future episode, I'd love to set up a discussion about issues that women have with men in some of these same areas, just because I know women are frustrated with men too. We're all frustrated with each other. But yeah, so if you're going to ask a guy's height, you have no right to get mad if a man asks you about your weight. So they're both valid preferences. And so, when you're going through these dating profiles, those are flat out things that people look for. If you want to look and figure out, are you physically attracted to them? Are you attracted to them in other ways? Do you share interests? These are all things that matter very much. And so if you don't want somebody that's heavy and you look at somebody's profile and you can't figure it out, but it looks like just maybe that they're heavier than what you might like, you should absolutely ask about the weight just to make sure. And, from a man's perspective, if I'm talking to a woman who genuinely gets mad about that, I don't, you know what? We're done talking. You're too immature. We're not on equal footing here. I'm not interested. So even if you're not fat, if you're going to be bothered because I asked you the same kind of question about your dimensions, then whatever, we're done talking. And so don't get mad. Don't get, if you're the guy, don't get mad. Just move on. Go on to the next one. There's plenty of fish in the sea. So another thing that women do in the same vein of dishonesty is not posting accurate photos. um, that either portray them accurately or completely as they are in the present. So one of the first times that one of my first girlfriends many years ago, um, when I was talking with her online, um, really pretty. She looked good. Very attractive. But then when I met her in person, she was much heavier. And so I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of that relationship. I absolutely confronted her about it. I still gave her a chance. Ended up not being a bad person, but we were both young, dumb, and well, anyway. But the point is, this is catfishing. Even if it's so, I know a lot of people think of catfishing as just something where you take somebody else's photos and say that's you. That's definitely not cool either. But if you gained weight in the last year or two, and it's significant, you should probably post a more updated picture. And I know some people are going to take an issue with that because they're afraid that somebody's not going to like them because they're fat. My response to that is you should be after somebody who wants you for who you are, not who you want them to think you are, who you actually are. Um, if you're swinging and missing and dating, guys do this too, um, misrepresenting themselves, and it's the same thing. You've just got to be honest. So one of the things that women do, that they try to sidestep this, and women have been doing this for years, is just face only shots. And so if I'm going through a dating profile, because there are women who are heavy, the fat doesn't show in their face, but if you see the rest of them, you might find out they're much larger than what you're bargaining for. And because everybody wears their weight differently. And I've seen people who, if you just look at their picture, they don't look fat in the face. They just don't show it at all. And that yet, if you see them, they're big, they're huge. And and so again, this is a form of catfishing. If you're a woman and you meet somebody, I was watching a video, a little clip on Facebook the other day where somebody, um, I think it was originating from TikTok, but either way, this guy was hiding behind a door, and he was looking across the street at his date who just didn't know where he was, but he saw her, and she was fatter than what he thought. And so I don't know what her profile looked like or what he thought he was going to get, but he was sitting on the phone, didn't acknowledge where he was other than "I see you," and he just says, "I didn't know you were big. I didn't know you were big. I'm not interested." And that's and I know that that's really aggravating for the woman, very disheartening. Don't get me wrong, no, rejection isn't fun, but you're going to get a lot more rejection when you're dishonest. And again, this goes for guys too. I look forward to having the man version of this discussion, because again, if we're talking equality, I absolutely can't ignore the things that men do that women don't like. But yeah, I'll have to find a lady that wants to rein in on her um, opinions. But either way, but yeah, so just show who you are, not who you were. And again, another thing too is like just the other day, I was going through a Facebook dating app, and that's fun, that's great. And so what happened? I was looking through these pictures, saw a girl that looked really good, but then I noticed that the picture at the top, which is very likely the most recent picture, I'm not 100% sure how Facebook dating organizes the photos. I know you can kind of slide them around on a screen. So I don't know, but I have to assume that the most recent one is first. Um, Maybe not always, but in this case, if you look very closely, the picture was cropped, and she had a noticeably larger stomach, and it would have been really easy to not see that. Um, and so again, I didn't have interest at that point because not even so much like she wasn't didn't look like she was going to be so big that I wasn't going to be attracted, but somebody who's that insecure, I'm not interested in. If you're gonna, rock what you have, because if you can do it confidently and it doesn't look like you're letting yourself go, um, you might still have a shot with the person you like. If you got other good qualities, it's not all about physical appearance. Just be honest. You know, they tell guys growing up, oh yeah, you got to show confidence. Women love that, but you know what? Men love a confident woman, or at least they should. So another thing that women do that comes up in these dating profiles is demanding that men have a certain income level, which is mainly to compensate for their lack of ambition or financial acumen, depending on the word that you want to use for it. So I understand the whole premise of not wanting to date somebody that's broke. Dating somebody that's broke is no fun. First off, if you're broke yourself, you can't have that much fun with another broke person, unless it's the kind of fun that's probably going to get you both in trouble. But, you know, I understand wanting to find somebody who has a stable income. I understand that if, say, you're a doctor, you probably don't want to date somebody who is working in fast food part time. I mean, again, we generally should be trying to seek somewhat equal footing. You don't have to make they don't have to make the same amount of money, but like a good pairing might be a doctor and an office manager, two people who are professional, and you know those are reasonable things. Hey, what do you do for a living? you know but there are posts that go around in these groups that I'm in that show like silly woman things. And they'll say, "Oh, well, must have 6 figures, must be 6 foot tall, must be all these things. Otherwise, don't bother swiping right." And this is somebody who is immature. This is somebody that's um, not just not a good person. If you're seeing that as a man, you need to process that as a red flag. This is not somebody that's worth your time. This is somebody that's going to give you all sorts of trouble. Um, what you should be looking for more is somebody that outright says, hey, I got a job, I got my own place, I drive, you know, I don't need any money from you, I don't need you, but I'd like to have somebody else. There are plenty of women that do that, and some of those women aren't the larger women. So, I mean, somebody's weight, of course, isn't an indicator of any level of success. But I'm just saying, depending on what things you weigh out is more important, you might be wise to what's the word, compromise on something that you might, as long as it's not going to put you in a dangerous situation. Um, so yeah, don't sit there and expect a man to finance your life. And following in that, so if you're a woman with kids, especially as a single mother, I get it, it's frustrating. And you know don't sit there and demand that your date pay ridiculous fee, pay anything for your babysitters, and try to pass it off as, well, you're the man, this is part of the package, as you pay for my babysitters. Um, and don't get me wrong, there are certain reasonable fees for babysitters. Like if they're only asking for like 30-40 bucks, that's probably legit. But I saw a screenshot where somebody was asking for 250 bucks. Now, I guarantee you um, that 100% was not just for a babysitter. About 50 of that at most was probably for the babysitter. She was going to pocket the rest because she just wanted to use you. Again, that's a red flag. And you know, so if you're trying to date a single mother, um, you should have zero expectation to pay for their babysitter unless there's like a special occasion. But that's that kind of special occasion that happens if you've been dating for a while. And maybe you're hitting some sort of anniversary. Maybe there's a holiday. Maybe there's something you both want to do. Maybe go see a movie, have some adult time, whatever. There are times where it's acceptable to ask your partner, "Hey, could you pay for the babysitter so we can go?" But if you're just meeting somebody right off the bat as a woman, you're gonna pass off as needy. That's another red flag that you put off. If you want to date a man and you have children, um, you absolutely need to figure out how to pay for your babysitter, at least in the beginning, because if it gets serious, that's when you have that discussion. Say, look, you know, this is a reality for me. I only make this much amount of money. Um, I can take care of it this many times a month, but if you want us to go out more, you're going to have to help me with a babysitter, and that's reasonable. That's a reasonable way to do it. Um, so, yeah, but yeah, so then another thing, and by the way, this is literally where women have a twisted view, some women rather, have a twisted view of personal responsibility and accountability. So there's actually a laundry list of issues that men will complain about women uh, in the realm of personal responsibility and accountability, and not just areas of dating, not just areas, of the other areas that we're actually going to talk about tonight. Like this whole thing is could be something that I could have a 3-4 hour podcast on, just talking about this specific thing, and we're not doing that tonight. um, I just kind of want to scratch the surface on this. That's all this is for. But yeah, but that's definitely a thing, and again, that's just some women. Not all women are like this, and there's a lot of men that have that same problem. So none of these things, I can't stress this enough, none of these things are on the list of things that a man shouldn't do either. Um, if because there's single dads that flat out try to do that too. I don't think the guys are necessarily as bad as the women, but if you tell me it's happened, I'm going to believe you, okay? So, anyway, poor communication skills with men. So, now this is kind of a fun topic, and I'm going to, uh, again, so this goes back to equality, this goes back to all the other things I talked about, um, and it may seem to be in conflict with my one statement of nobody's entitled to another person's time. So, but here's what I mean by that. So what women like to leave guys on read, not replying, and treat it like some sort of game. But they'll do anything to avoid direct replies to the person that's messaging them. Um, so this is actually a topic we'll talk about for a little bit here. So first off, um, it's really immature to do that. Now I understand people get busy. People get busy. I get busy. I don't have time to sit and read and respond to all my messages, and not within 5 minutes of them being sent. Okay, that's not a realistic expectation. Don't expect from another person something that you're not willing to expect from yourself. So for me, I know that, especially if I'm at work, I'm depending on what it is or who it is, I may not be able to reply to it until I'm off work, or at least on break or on lunch or whatever. um, Now, this is where it gets into kind of, a controversial topic, because there are guys that are rude, that are very just, very mentally ill and immature, and they will try to force their way into a woman's attention. And that's not cool. So I understand why some women feel the need to um, just ignore certain guys' messages. And like, but that's what the block feature is for, okay? If you're going to sit there, leave them on read, if you have no value in maintaining contact with them, if there is no value in having them as any sort of connection. Just hit the block button. If you don't want to hear from them, hit the block button. You can block them from Messenger, for example, without blocking them on Facebook, so they can comment on your stuff. But if you don't want to talk to them, make it very clear. Don't hide your intentions. If you want nothing to do with them, tell them. And again, use that block. If you leave them on read, you don't have the right to complain that this person keeps messaging me. This person keeps messaging me. I don't want to talk to them. What do I do? Fucking block them. Grow the fuck up. Tell them to fuck off and hit the block button. End it. There's no excuse for any other behavior. And, again, back to the busy thing. If I send you a message, for example, and 3-4 days goes by and you don't find it in yourself to reply, and I see that you're commenting and posting on Facebook, I really hate to say it, but you're not convincing me that you are genuinely so busy you can't respond. Um, I don't care that Messenger is saying it's not read or not seen or whatever. There are absolutely ways to view these and defeat that mechanism in Messenger. I use them myself. If you're listening to this and you sent me a message, there's a very good chance I've read your message in full, I've seen it, and Facebook isn't telling you this because I didn't want it to. Um, and so I have access to this technology. It's a free tool. You have access to it. So I have to assume that you might be using that tool or a similar one um, yourself. So, but yeah. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But the other thing, too, that women do in the dating realm is simply assuming that everyone with a penis wants to sleep with them. Trust me, woman, you're not that special. Sometimes a friend is just a friend. Friends do spend time together. Friends do hang out. Friends do go places and do things. You know what I mean? Like, just because he's a guy doesn't mean he wants down your pants. Maybe if he says, why don't I come over? We hang out, we talk, or I help you clean up your house, or, do you need something? I'll pick it up from the store. Don't take that necessarily as an advance. There are guys that will use that as a mechanism for an advance, so that um, kind of paranoia is certainly justified. But don't make the assumption that everyone who's owns a penis that's trying to be nice to you wants to have sex with you. Okay, that's not realistic. That's not what's happening, and you have to evaluate yourself to really answer that question of what's the likelihood this person actually wants to sleep with me, or maybe, just maybe, they want to be my friend. So anyway, we're going to move out of the dating part. We're going to talk about careers and financial issues. So again, so this isn't every woman, and I'm not saying this makes the person less classy or anything like that. But there are women who have way too much focus on sex work and OnlyFans, and that turns into the career, the persona that they want to put out. And don't get me wrong, there are people who do this. They get lucky and they make, like you hear it all the time. People make millions of dollars. They live their dreams, good for them. But that's not something you can walk into and expect. There are people who go in to MLMs such as Neora and make it big, but that's not realistic for everybody to do it. Again, both cases is a business, and it's all dependent on you and what kind of audience and people you connect with. So, but yeah, so the reason why I say this is it doesn't do anything for your work experience, and eventually, as you age, your body will change, um, and your health may be declining too. I mean, the older you get, you're not getting any healthier. That's a fact. So there may be a point in time where you're not able to continue that line of work. So even if you do that, you have to keep in mind you build up a proper career, a business. That's a long-term solution. And just remember and keep in mind have been many successful women that have started legitimate businesses I'm going to continue to declare like sex work and OnlyFans as something illegitimate. Um, say what you want. Yeah, it's a way to make money, but it's, there's good reasons why we can't call that legitimate work. Um, and we may disagree with that statement. That's a hill I'm willing to die on. But but there are plenty of successful women who have started non-sex work, non OnlyFans, legitimate stuff, cleaning, staffing, and pretty much any industry. Um, Chances are really good there's a lot of woman-owned businesses in that space. Doesn't matter if it's tech, could be construction, could be HVAC. It doesn't matter. Women absolutely do well in any field that they get into. Why? Guess what? Y'all are fucking equal to men. You're not relegated to sex work. You're not relegated to just modeling or certain career fields. If you want to do it, you can go and do it. There's nothing keeping you from doing it. Um, and so it definitely, definitely looks bad if you're going into something like OnlyFans. So yeah, and speaking of OnlyFans, and I hate bringing it up because it's not like a bad thing, but some people make it into a bad thing. So like some women will solicit their male friends to subscribe to their OnlyFans, or just asking them for money instead of offering to do work or trying to find a job. Again, this goes back to equal, and there's a lot of stuff that goes through a guy's head, and I have theories on what goes on in a woman's head, on what happens when a woman's asking a guy that they're not dating, that they may not even be all that close to, hey, do you have $20? I need it for blah blah blah. um, and that's the whole thing. Um, so sometimes, some women, some people are really good about, oh, just give me a handout, and that's really annoying. um, I would much rather somebody come to me, hey, is there anything you need help with that I could do to make some money? Can I clean your house and make $50, something like that? And at that point, that's not really a problematic question. That's not something that I'm going to look down on. That's not something, I'm going to have a lot more respect for that person, um, because from the perspective of somebody who works for everything that I have, from the perspective of someone that has to work, has to try hard, um, I find that quality in somebody else to be very attractive. So, but yeah, but then it's like, and respectable at the very least, but just assuming that, again, assuming that everyone with a penis wants to sleep with you, that's the same thing assuming that everyone with a penis wants to see you naked, that wants to spend money to see you naked or dance or whatever it is you're doing in a sexual way in front of a camera. And that's unrealistic, that's very immature, and that's very lazy, if you ask me. Don't get me wrong, like I said, there are people who do well with it, and if you get lucky, you know, just like I do this podcast and my YouTube channel as a hobby, and I could absolutely make money doing this too if I really truly wanted to. Um, I mean, so I'm not sitting here saying that if you're going into, producing adult content, that you should only do it for free. No, that's not what I'm saying. You should absolutely charge for that. Because more so than what I do here, that should absolutely not be free. But but yeah, so that's just, one of the problems that some women do. And I don't know if they know that's what they're doing. I don't know if they realize that's the vibes that they're putting off. But if you're a woman who's done this and you've never thought about it, I just want you to know that that's what you're making people think. That's what they're thinking of you when you do this. So if that's not what you're trying to do, if you're genuinely just not trying to generate business and make customers, um, if you're trying to make genuine connections, you're trying to make real friends, then be careful who you ask to buy your services. Um, and it goes the same way with an MLM. It goes the same way with any sort of business that you start, even if you're making soap or jewelry or you just join an MLM and you're trying, like, all these things are fine, but you still have to be very careful the way you promote so you don't alienate the people that you talk to. Because if you make somebody feel like you're looking at them like a wallet, that's very, very bad. And so this kind of lead the reason why it affects guys in particular is because that leads into this next point here. Um, there are women who absolutely expect the man to finance their entire lives. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. There are people, both men and women, that absolutely want to live, kind of a traditional life where the man pays for everything, the woman stays at home, um, kind of like it was in the 50s. And there's literally nothing, if that's what both people want and they're able to do it, and that's what you're doing and you're happy with it, that's fine. Um, but you can't go into a relationship demanding that out of the other person until you've really gotten to know them. So if you're seeking a traditional type of life where you want to be a stay-at-home mom or you want to be a housewife, um, be upfront about that. There's nothing wrong with wanting those things. There's nothing wrong with that, and just keep looking. But of course, the more you're asking for, you need to make sure that what you're bringing to the table is going to be worthwhile uh, to the guy that you're getting with, because there's some people who don't have a whole lot. They have more baggage and more problems than they have good qualities, and it may not be worth putting up with those things to let them stay home and live for free. And so that's just, but yeah, so overall though, like, the vast majority of people in our society today, we're not in a position to do this, to allow this to happen. It's not because we don't want to. Uh, as a man, I would love to provide for a woman, be the sole source of income. But unfortunately, because of the economy, because it's degraded to the condition that it's in, not that many people get to do that. So the reality is, for most people, both partners have to work. And that's just how it is. And so at that point, it doesn't really matter how the bills are split again. It must be a mutual decision, because men and women are equal. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm the woman, you're supposed to pay for all my stuff. That's just not, no. And if you're a guy and you've been led to believe that that's acceptable, that that's just how things are, no, it's not. Whoever told you that lied to you. Um, and maybe it was true at one point, like I said, back in the 50s, back in like our grandparents' days, that might have been true then. It's just not true now. So we're going to move on to some other points here. So we're going to go back to poor communication. So again, if you just don't want to talk to somebody, tell them and block them if need be. If they're making advances to you, decline them directly. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time. So when I said, nobody's entitled to, another person's time, it only takes a few seconds to say, no, I'm not interested, now leave me alone, and then hit the block button if the person continues. And then after that, if you don't want to, respond to them because they keep driving, then as long as you've done your part, then at that point, I suppose it's okay to keep leaving them on read or whatever. But you really should just hit block, because again, if you don't find value in that connection, if you don't find value that this person is interacting with you on social media, if there's literally no value there, um, there's no reason not to just block them and cut them out. So that's just how it is. You could at least unfriend, you can barricade, you can block them up. They can, Facebook at least gives you all sorts of degrees of control for how they interact with you. And then, so unfortunately, so if you keep leaving them on read, you keep frustrating them, it can absolutely escalate to something awkward or dangerous, just depending on how they know you. Um, so, yeah, regardless of what you think, just ignoring people on social media isn't going to be like an insurance policy that the person that's trying to talk to you isn't going to be a creeper, that they're not going to try and do something they shouldn't. Because if they know where you work, they know where you live, they know other ways of reaching you, then it can absolutely get worse and worse. And again, this is definitely, a situation where you need to involve the courts, you need to involve law enforcement, file restraining orders. I know all of these things are a pain in the ass, but document, 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 keep screenshots, have them stored in your phone. If you talk over phone numbers, make sure that the correct name is saved, first and last, not Johnny Asshole or Short Dick. Don't, you know, put their actual name there, because if you're giving screenshots, that can make it more difficult to get um, get things done. But yeah, so yeah, but finally, uh, just double standards have got to go. If you believe men and women should be equal, then act like it. If you, as a woman, prefer tall men, then you shouldn't get mad if a guy rejects you because you're obese. Use that as a sign you have some work to do, not something that they have a fault in. You're not a bad person because you're not attracted to a certain body type. You're not a bad person because you don't like somebody who's short. You're not a bad person because you don't like somebody that's tall. It's just all in how you react to the person that you don't like, and how you reject them. Because there's definitely polite and proper ways, and really just more appropriate ways to reject. I suppose if they're being jerks to you from the outright, then you should, take the liberty to cuss them out. But yeah, I just wanted to keep this short. It wasn't like a huge thing. And just in closing, I just want to reiterate, this isn't because I'm having problems with anybody in this regard. I could care less. Um, like for instance, there are definitely people, that are female, that I have messaged in recent times, that aren't replying to my messages. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You know what? I don't care. Um, People are going to put value on you in different levels. And if they, and honestly, if somebody isn't, responding to you quickly enough, then first off, that means they don't have the same interest in you that you have in them. And so if they're not responding to you, you should take that as a blessing, that you're already getting this red flag that they're not worth your time. And because people who do this will often do the same thing. And so, like, when I was growing up, when I was younger, it was absolutely a thing uh, where us guys would bitch about how some women would not answer text messages right away, but then they lose their marbles when, uh, if the guy decided not to answer text right away. And there are definitely women who do that. That it still happens. It's not that's something that's never going to change. And and it's just immaturity. It's insecurity. It's all things that, you know, it's bullsquit, And so if you're going to do that, just remember, the problem with that is expecting the man to do something that a woman isn't expected to do, is in direct conflict with my angle with this entire discussion, with men and women being equal. So if it's permissible for a woman to take, a few hours or a day or whatever to respond to a message, then you, as the woman, should understand that if the guy takes a while to get back to you, then that's okay too. Sometimes two people are busy and they don't have the time that they'd like to, to socialize. So that's just something to, to keep in mind. But overall, um, so like I said, I didn't want to touch into certain things like mental health, and so that goes into the case of, like, some women are narcissists and will do things. I was with one. I know people who have been with others, and a lot of the same surfaces come up. But that isn't something that's exclusively female. That isn't, I know, narcissistic guys that do the same damn thing. So that's why mental illnesses were something I was excluding from this discussion. Um, and don't get me wrong, there are guys that put dumb stuff on their Facebook profile or on their dating profiles as well. And I would love to get into that. But this episode was not about that. It was about the things women do. So if you have any, go ahead and comment. If you hate what I have to say, go ahead and dislike it and comment anyway. Tell me I'm a jerk. Tell me I'm wrong. But again, those three pillars, if you want to call them, that I mentioned earlier, men and women are equal, no double standards, things like that. If you've got a problem with any of those statements, then if you have a problem with anything that I've said here, it's because one of those three things we disagree on. That's going to be the root cause. Everything that I put together here tonight stemmed off of those things. Um, so that's again. So same way with the rules of engagement, of communication. It's like just because you don't want to talk to them because you don't want to talk to them. Well, you tell them you don't want to talk to them, and then you block them if they keep harassing you. It's as simple as that, and it's just immaturity. And again, there's guys that do it too. So I'm not sitting here saying that any of these things are exclusive to women. There are men that do these very, very same things. Um, but as a man, if you're allowing any of these things to happen in a relationship, then you need to reevaluate your position and your self-worth, because you shouldn't be putting up with any of these behaviors. And if you're trying to date somebody and you see any of these things going on, they're red flags. If somebody is hiding who they are to you, that's a symptom of a much larger issue. They're insecure. As somebody who's insecure is going to have a lot more problems than what meets us, what meets the eye. These are going to be the women that typically will accuse you of cheating, that will accuse you of, that will cause problems, just unneeded drama, because they're not secure in themselves. And I'm not saying that you can't, that a photo is the only way to determine that. They could post a picture of them, show you how big they are, and they could still be insecure about it, but at least they're trying to be honest. So these are things that you'll have to scope out for yourself as you get to know somebody, because if they're insecure, it doesn't get better. They're you can bring it up to them, you can encourage to go get help, but ultimately you're not their therapist, you're not their counselor. And if it's something you realize you can't handle, it's time to walk away as soon as you recognize there's a problem that's that you can't recover from. So, but at any rate, like I said, what do you guys think? Comment below, where you can comment. So I have been zucked again for another 30 days. And turns out Facebook doesn't like my sense of humor. So if you want to talk with me, interact with me, you can do it at georgiasgeekhub.com. If you know how to use Facebook, you know how to use my site, just sign up and I'm there. But I look forward to hearing from you. So peace out and until the next one.